Here.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Moving on, we were moving on to.
Can I just get 1 second? Sorry.
Yep.
Can everyone see my screen right now? Because there's been a couple comments.
Nope, it's a black screen.
Yeah,
it's black screen. Okay. Just give me one.
Okay, I will present. I can share my screen for the meantime, and then Wing, just let me know when you can.
Is it better now?
No.
That is okay.
If you wanna like exit out of Zoom, and then I can let you back in.
Sure.
Okay. All right. I will just share my screen, everyone. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, with that, we're going to move on to item 4, approval of the minutes. So the minutes for the Legislative Council public minutes of 2020-11-05 have been distributed. Are there any corrections or changes to the minutes at this time? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes as distributed?
Motion to approve the minutes by unanimous consent.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Can I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williamson. Senator Daryanani, I noticed your hand was up. Do you have an amendment?
No, it's just to move and second.
Oh.
But I didn't get the chance to, so I feel.
Sorry. All right, thank you very much, Councillor Williamson. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, these will stand unanimously approved. Moving on to item 5, adoption of the agenda. The agenda has been distributed. Are there any corrections or changes to the agenda at this time?
Yes, sorry.
Yep, VP Finance.
Could I motion to add a report by the funding committee?
All right, do you have any other amendments at this time?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, VP Finance. Are there any other corrections or changes to the agenda at this time? Yep, Community Affairs Commissioner, we can move affordable student housing. If that's the wish, can we just have a formal, so we have a motion from the Community Affairs Commissioner to move the Affordable Student Housing Committee to be with the UTIL presentation. Can I have a motion to that capacity? Or can I just have someone to indicate that they would like that changed?
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, VP External.
Speaker, do you want to make me co-host again?
Yeah. Okay, Wayne, you can try sharing again.
Does that work for everyone?
Nope.
Is it still black?
Yeah.
I think the problem is that I upgraded to the latest macOS version and Zoom's not updated it. So that
I just had that issue. I'm sorry, we can strike this from the minutes, but I just had that issue. What I just did right before council is I re-downloaded Zoom and it seemed to get rid of the issue because I had.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, I'll do that then. Yeah, sorry about the inconvenience. I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. Just give me 1 more second, everyone. I have to reshare my screen again. For Laurent, I'm going to give you co-host access once we get to your item on the agenda. So once we get to 7, I will ensure that I get you co-host access for your presentation. Are there any further, let me just share my screen. Are there any other individuals wishing to put forward an amendment at this time? Yep, I can certainly do that, Nathan. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to note that just due to the settings, not everyone is going to be able to have access. So Everyone with SMU.ca email addresses will be able to. So Nathan, you should have one, so you should be good. For everyone else, I apologize. That just has to do with the shared drive settings that we have. But there is the agenda setting. With that, are there any further individuals wishing to put forward amendments or corrections to the agenda at this time? Hearing and seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
All right, thank you very much. The external, thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, it shall stand approved. Moving on to item 6, report of the steering committee. I will just open it up. All right, good evening, everyone. So the steering committee met at 3:30 p.m. EST on Sunday, November 15th, 2020. Myself, the parliamentarian, the speaker on call, Lee, and Councillor Smith were present, as well. Councillor Reid and President Earl sent regrets. Subsequent approvals of the agenda were conducted via email communications. We had no guest speakers at this session. For new business, we have 2 items up for approval or review this evening. We first have the notice of motion regarding amendments to the committee terms of reference 2020-11-19. We also have the motion to adopt a SMU 5-year plan 2020-11-19 coming last week after a generative discussion. For business arising, we have no business arising for this evening. Presentations, that was a typo. We actually have 2 presentations for this evening. The first one is Util, and the second one will be from Leicester Asset Management for steering committee innovations. Once again, for all individuals, for all councillors, please ensure that you are actively referring to the absences and reporting schedule located within the Google Drive to ensure that you are aware of when you will be reporting to the Legislative Council. With that, please also ensure that you are adhering to the deadline set for reporting. As well, please note that it is the discretion of the dais to strike items out of order as deemed necessary. Please ensure that all comments remain relevant to the discussion at hand. This is to say no issues relating to ongoing legal matters will be discussed this evening. If they are discussed, I will promptly strike them out of order, and they will be no individual will be able to object to the consideration of the chair or appeal the decision. As well, we do have confidential session this evening. For members of the gallery, please note that you are ineligible to participate in such discussions and to please leave the Zoom call before Legislative Council has entered into confidential session. That concludes the report of the steering committee. Are there any individuals wishing to ask questions on the report? Seeing none, I'm just going to see if I can get the parliamentarian to share his screen once again.
Yes, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Yeah, Senior President.
For the 5-year plan, I believe it should be a notice of motion because it's a plan, right?
Yes, my apologies. That's what I was, you're very much correct. Wing, it's not working.
It's still not working? Oh gosh. That's so strange.
I'm not sure what to do, but I can take over and for the meantime.
Okay, sure. I'll just like support you with the motions and stuff. Okay, sorry about that.
I'm going to ask, can you remove since we don't have any items for consent vote, can you remove that document with the voting directions?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to change the agenda just to reflect the changes that were indicated by the SMU president. That was the error of the steering committee. Senator Daryanani.
My Zoom is giving me issues, so I would like to raise a point of personal privilege to leave temporarily.
Okay, we'll note the temporary departure of Senator Daryanani. As well, if any other individuals have problems with their Zoom, feel free to do the same thing that Senator Daryanani has just done, either through the chat, and then I'll recognize you, or by simply raising your hand. With that, Seeing no individuals with questions on the report of the steering committee, we're going to move on to item 7, guest speakers. We're first going to begin with item 7A, a report from UTIL. And if you just
maybe for some of you, UTIL in our collaboration with SSMU, update you for all the others that have been aware. If, for example, you were on council in the last few years, you may have heard about this project already a couple of times. So I'm going to start by very quickly introducing UTIL, remind you of the work we've been doing around this project, and update you on what's new and what are the next steps. So UTIL is a nonprofit organization. It's an acronym for Unité de Travail pour l'Implantation de Logements Étudiants. Our mandate is to promote, study, and develop affordable student housing in Quebec. We were founded by students in 2013, and our members as an organization are student unions, and SSMU is actually one of our earliest members that we're very proud to collaborate with. So you can consider UTIL kind of like the nonprofit real estate branch or collaborator of the student movement. Our work covers everything tied to student housing. We do research work, so we, in the lack of any data on student housing conditions and public statistics, we collaborate with student unions to produce that data directly through our flagship fall survey, which we will actually be doing again next year with SSMU. This gives really detailed data on how students are living, where they're living, what type of rent they're paying, how much they're getting ripped off, spoiler alert, a lot, and allows us to document the need for affordable student housing and lobby governments to support financially that work. We also have an information and outreach branch. Our main project here is a website called likehome.info, which contains a lot of information on how to find an apartment in Montreal. It includes an interactive map where you can see the neighborhoods that are accessible from your campus. It has a lot of info on tenants' rights. It's consulted by about 100,000 people a year. So if you have issues with your landlords, with your flatmates, trying to find an apartment, that's a good reference for you. Until we build enough nonprofit student housing that all students can enjoy high quality housing without a predatory landlord. Because that's our ultimate goal and work, is to build nonprofit affordable student housing. So far, we have one project that's constructed. It's the Woodnote. It's a 144-bedroom project that we developed in partnership with the Concordia Student Union. So this was our pilot project, our kind of like a first model to show that not-for-profit student housing can be done. So that's the first piece of the puzzle, but we're already working on new projects in Trois-Rivières, in Quebec City, in other cities across Quebec as well as more projects in Montreal. Which leads me to our collaboration with SSMU. We've had multiple collaborations over the year. Like I said, SSMU is actually one of our earliest members, and your collaboration has been foundational in getting us this far. Now we've entered a new stage on a collaboration with a concrete housing project, pun not intended. The goal being to house at least 200 students, McGill students year over year. Ideally, we're going for up to, or even more, 300 rooms is the goal, to have the biggest impact possible on McGill housing conditions. And the project will not be only housing, there will also be common spaces for both tenants, but also the student community at large to enjoy. And all these parameters are outlined in a contract that we've already signed last year, which include a maximum distance from campus and an affordability target of at least 15% rent reduction below market. So this was the result of a needs assessment, a feasibility study, and 2 referenda that we did together in the last years. These referenda led to SSMU investing 1.5 million in the project over the next 5 years. You have voted in favor of a fee levy in the spring to this effect. This money will be transferred to the project through a nonprofit student-led investment fund called the Popular University Student Housing Fund, but I won't get into the specifics. Our role will be to take those funds, leverage them, and raise the 30 million that we'll need to build that project. This is an estimated budget, of course. And these funds will come from both public and private sources. We've raised 7 million so far for our first projects from the City of Montreal. We're hoping to get them on board again. The federal government is also expected to be a big piece. And we also work with other nonprofit and affordable housing investment partners. But everyone is in line with the affordability vision, and that's the whole point. The next steps are to transfer the fee-levy to the push fund. So this is actually in the works already. We're also in discussion with your executive team, your VPs, to see whether there's a possibility for SMU to advance some of the fee levy payments, which would allow us to have more cash on hand to buy land, because that's the next steps. We're currently looking for land for the project. We're hoping to find it as soon as possible. It might come very quickly in the next few weeks or months. It might also take a year or more because we have limited opportunities in Montreal for a project of this size, but we are negotiating with multiple landowners at the moment. And as soon as we have the land piece locked in, we're going to be moving forward with city funding and the other partners that we expect to bring onto the project. It's just that the city is expected to grant the project for a couple of $1 million, and we're hoping to secure that before next year's municipal elections. Finally, to give you an idea of what we're looking at in terms of location, of course, this is all very preliminary because we'll be tied to whatever actually is available. This is the area that we're looking at initially. So as close to downtown as possible, obviously. This includes the Milton Park area. This also includes the closer areas of Pointe Saint-Charles in the southwest. Keep in mind that SMU will have the final decision before land purchase. So we're looking at opportunities now, and when we do find something, we'll be bringing it to your executive team and probably board for validation. And to give you an idea also of the maximum distance we could go, this is the 25-minute transit on the map. So obviously we're not going to go all the way into like deep Hochelaga. We understand that it's better to look west, better to look near the campus. But it's one of these strategies to achieve affordable rents is to go slightly outside of the downtown area and try to find opportunities where land is a bit cheaper. So that's it for me. I hope you're as excited for this project as we are. And I don't know if we can do questions, speaker, but if there are, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, we for sure can. Are there any individuals, if there's any individuals with questions on the presentation from Util, you can either raise your hand or you can indicate so via the speaking list. Okay, I don't believe we have any questions for Util. Yeah, actually we do. Councillor Krosick.
Yeah, this is slightly tangential, but I was actually curious, what's the current status of the Woodnote?
The Woodnote is fully occupied, and I think people are happy there. The co-op has had a hard time kicking off. The community is kind of limited because of COVID. So the common spaces aren't open yet. It's harder to gather there. But I've already extended the invitation to your Affordable Student Housing Committee to organize a visit. Maybe that can be opened to councillors if that's an option. We'll be happy to have you visit.
All right, thank you very much. And Councillor Reid.
Hi, Laurent. Thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, you cited a rent of 15 to 30 below market. I'm just wondering how that's calculated and if it changes with respect to like the neighborhood that the development is geographically situated in. Thanks.
Yeah, very good question. So that's calculated according to a fair market price analysis by chartered estimators, evaluators. So that is proportional to the neighborhood, which is one of the reasons why we're hoping to be Well, we're looking first in the neighborhoods that are next to downtown, because if you build downtown, even 30% below downtown rents is still more expensive than even 15% below Southwest rents. And that's just because there's only so much we can do to lower rents when land costs super high rents.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other individuals with questions at this time? There are seeing no more questions. Laurent, thank you for coming to speak to us tonight. With that, we'll move on to the second part of the presentation, which is the report from the Affordable Student Housing Committee. So Nathan, are you going to be presenting?
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself and then pass it over to my colleague. So my name's Nathan. I'm the Community Affairs Commissioner, and I'm also active in the Milton Park Citizens Committee. So passing over to Andrew.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan, and thank you, Laurent, for your presentation as well. Good evening to everybody, and thank you for being here, and thank you for having me here. My name is Andrew. I'm an urban planning student, and I'm part of the Affordable Student Housing Committee. I have been for just over a year now. So we are just here tonight to give you sort of an update on what we're doing and sort of what our main goals are as a committee. So there's sort of four principal things, and Laurent has just very clearly detailed the first of those. That is the construction of a project. That's our main goal as the committee, is to ensure that there is actually something deliverable, something producible that students can live in that is affordable. So we've done that through the referendum and whatnot with this project. And I mean, hopefully long term, these similar projects can happen in the future. But for now, that's sort of goal number one for us in our committee, is to make sure that students have some sort of affordable option. So we're working closely with UTIL, and we hope that something can get built here quickly. The other three things are separate from UTIL. The other three goals that we have are separate from UTIL. The first is just ensuring that tenants know their rights, particularly McGill students, obviously, that they know their rights. In Quebec, we often forget that comparative to the rest of Canada, we actually have pretty good tenant rights here. They're not effective, though, if students don't know what they are. So we're really trying to mobilize that with posters and workshops and what have you, to make sure that people are aware what their rights are, particularly given that there are a lot of McGill students who are not necessarily born in Quebec or from Quebec. So tenants' rights is one thing. The other thing that we're trying to do is just advocate for public ownership of the hospital sites, the former hospital sites around McGill. So the big one, obviously, is the Royal Vic. But then there's also the Hôtel Dieu, as well as the l'Institut des Sourds Muettes. So these are three sites that we don't want them to become private. We'd rather them to stay public, in the public hand, because we believe that these sites need to be used for the public good. Housing is a public good. Therefore, we believe that there's sort of a natural overlap there. So there's an open letter going around, which I'm sure many of you have seen. If you haven't seen it, then ask us about it and we can help you sign it. And that's essentially just advocating that these sites remain public and in the public good, and that they aren't given to private developers for private benefit. The final thing that we are kind of trying to do is just but create general community relations, most notably with the Milton Park Citizens Committee. So we're trying to see if there's potential for partnership there, again, to sort of advance these other goals that we have of ensuring that people know their tenants' rights, ensuring that public sites remain public, and generally advancing affordable housing for McGill students. So I know that's relatively quick, but those are the four things that we've done. If anybody has questions about what we're doing, I'm happy to answer those if there's a time for that. Furthermore, if anybody is interested in participating or getting involved with the committee, I know that Nathan and I, as well as the other committee members, would be very open and very happy with that. So feel free to give either Nathan or myself an email, and we'll be happy to get you involved. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report of the Affordable Student Housing Committee at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 7B, report by Lester Asset Management. And Wing, we can see your screen now.
Awesome.
I'm just going to confirm. Can anyone else see Wing's screen beside me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. With that, Stephen, if you'd like to take it away, you have 10 minutes default speaking time, but if you need more, I'll let you know when you reach that, and then someone will certainly be able to grant you an extension.
Right, 10 minutes. Okay, guys, that's that's pretty fast. Can I control the pages, or is somebody doing that for me?
I'm currently sharing it, but if you'd like, you can be the co-host and you can present as well.
Okay, I don't know how to flip the pages though. Would you do that?
Yeah, just let me know, and then I can.
Okay, I'll just say next slide. I'll just say next slide. Okay, next slide.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice to see all of you. Quite a crowd. So briefly, for those of you that don't know us, firm was founded in the late 80s by Murray Lester. That's the father of the legendary McGill professor, Ken Lester. I don't know if any of you courses from him, but he actually retired last year. I joined 14 years ago upon Murray's death, and immediately instituted two active management strategies, Canadian equities, Canadian fixed income, that we've been managing as core strategies for the last 14 and a half years. And 3 years ago, I bought a majority stake in the company with Tony Beck, who's a very well-known macroeconomic analyst who started the Bank Credit Analyst and became the largest known publication in the world. So Tony's a very well-known macro economist. So management owns 56% and Beck Capital owns 44%. We're three portfolio managers with 5 other members of the staff. Next slide. So that's me. I went to McGill Engineering and MBA. So, I'm very loyal to McGill. Also went to Marianopolis. I have 30 years unique experience in finance, corporate lending, investment banking, chief financial officer, outsourced CIO, started a family office, and then I've been managing money for 14 years here. And I have 2 really strong CFAs supporting me, one who's focused on fixed income and the other one who's focused on the Canadian US equities. Next slide. There's Tony. You can read all about him. Next slide. We only have 10 minutes. So our assets have grown from about 100 million when I joined to over 300 million today, and about 15% or 17% now, 54 million is institutional. We consider you guys in the institutional category. We manage money mostly for private wealthy families, but also some foundations and some universities and other nonprofits. Next slide.
Stephen, I'm just going to note that the 10 minutes you have isn't strict. So if you do need more time, don't feel like you need to rush through. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Our biggest strategy is Canadian equity, of which 68 is in a pooled fund and 110 million is in separately managed accounts. For Canadian fixed income, it's 134 million. We manage a $24 million institutional pool for 20 pension funds, and the other 110 million is in segregated accounts. You guys are considered a segregated account in both of those strategies. So our Canadian equity strategy is all cap. It's very different from the index, and we do that on purpose so we can generate alpha. We have a stellar 10-year track record, having generated 9.7% versus the TSX index at 5.2%. So that's a massive outperformance, which ranks us 3rd in Canada out of 101 managers for our 10-year track record, 9th out of 145 managers for our 5-year track record, and currently 9th out of 160 managers over the last 12 months. So we're very proud of those numbers. It's hard to keep up, but we're working hard to stay on top. On the fixed income side, it's mostly a high yield strategy because that's where we can add value. It's more on the corporate bond side as opposed to government bonds. Again, we have a stellar track record, having generated 5.9% versus the Canadian bond universe at 4.2%. And because of that, we won the Quebec Emerging Managers Competition last year and received that $20 million plus institutional mandate for roughly 20 pension funds. Next slide, please. So on the Canadian equity side, we're very different from the index, as I mentioned, and we're out to generate higher returns than the market, but taking less risk than the market. When we mean less risk with the market, we mean less cyclicality, less volatility, and better diversification by industry and by company. So how do we do that? Our guiding principles are we act like a shareholder. We invest for the long term. We're not momentum chasers. We're not traders. We try to act like a business owner and invest for the long term, but we're not afraid to go activist if we have to, and we have done that on occasion. We're also very, very strict about price. So you have to be very disciplined, trying to buy at the lowest valuation possible at a discount to what the company is really worth. Otherwise, if you overpay for anything, you will lose money or make a very poor return. So the secret in this business is buying smartly, and we remain value investors over the whole 14-year period and continue to do so. But we have to be disciplined when things get overvalued, and that's probably the hardest thing to do is selling. So if you buy at a low enough valuation, you have downside protection, you have lower risk, and you have better upside. So we focus on company results. We don't pay attention to what's going on out there. People ask me, so how did the market do today? And sometimes, most of the time, I don't have a clue. I'm so buried in the financial statements or doing analysis on the companies. So we keep our emotions at bay as well. Very, very important not to make emotional decisions. Next slide. Right. So how do we do it? Well, it's a bottom-up, fundamental, value-driven analysis, as I mentioned, focused on really 3 criteria. So searching for value, bargain hunting, looking for low multiple stocks, trading well below what they're worth, and they tend to be lesser known, misunderstood companies. They could be less liquid, out of favor, but we want to avoid value traps. We're also looking for relative value, something that's trading cheaper than the rest of its peer group. We're also searching for value at a good price. So we could pay more for a company, but it obviously has to be growing faster. It's a question of paying the right price for the right growth rate. And those tend to have higher multiples, as I mentioned, than traditional value stocks. But we like to try and get in there before the analysts and the masses drive up the price. We're also very opportunistic. We look for events, mergers, consolidations, outright sales. We've had 40 companies in our portfolio acquired over the last 14 years, which is probably a record in Canada. There may be a guy in Vancouver that has more, but he plays a lot of tech stocks in the US. So we're very opportunistic. We're not there to buy turnarounds necessarily, but often when the masses are running for the exits, if we see value, we're not afraid to move in. Next slide. On the fixed income side, our focus, as I mentioned earlier, is really on corporate bonds. That's where we can really add the value. It's not by buying government bonds or playing the yield curve. Even though we have one of the world's most famous macroeconomists as our chairman, we're not there to try and predict currencies, interest rates, et cetera. We're there to analyze companies as we do for the stocks. We do the same thing for the bonds. So we're very diversified as well by issuer, by security, good risk control by group, related parties, groups. Quebecor Videotron is a good example. And we try to ladder the maturities as much as possible to minimize the reinvestment risk, keep our duration really low. We don't want to go and take long duration and lock in long rates, and then rates start to rise, and then you get killed as a bond holder. We like to keep the duration short, but make more money from the higher coupon, from the higher interest rate, from the higher risk we're taking by investing in companies, as opposed to try and predict where interest rates are going, as I mentioned earlier, or where inflation is going, and so on. So we have a higher weighting to the higher yield corporate bonds. We also prefer shares and convertible debentures, and we try and target a yield between 4% and 6%. Next slide. So as mentioned, we're opportunistic in equities. We're same thing in bonds. We're trying to buy things that are cheap When fear is high, we may look to upgrade the type of investments we make. And when complacency is low, well, we'll sell the riskier ones. We tend to look for businesses that are improving and they might benefit from a credit upgrade. So try and buy the bond before it gets upgraded, because once it's upgraded, then of course the price of the bond goes up and the yield goes down. We try not to buy too many cyclicals, although we do buy bonds of more cyclical companies. We try and avoid cyclical companies when we buy stocks, as mentioned earlier. And we really focus on the non-investment grade or high yield securities. And that's where we do the deep dive into the, the asset base, the covenants, the capital structure, et cetera. Next slide. We're very diligent in terms of our environmental and social governance considerations. I always have been here over the last 14 years. Just so you know, I'm also founder and chairman of the largest land conservancy in the Laurentians, which I founded 6 years ago, and now owns over 1,300 acres of wilderness areas in the Laurentian. So I'm very environmentally conscious. We try and avoid oil and gas, mining, exploration companies, that type of thing. No coal, no weapons, no tobacco, no gambling. So, our biggest positions, and in particular in your case, are renewable energy companies like Boralex and Interjex. You have much bigger weightings than the rest of our clients because you have more restrictions in terms of what we can or cannot buy. And we're also buyers of green bonds when they're available, which applies to your portfolio. And that investor appetite is growing for green bonds and renewables. So we're seeing more and more issuance like that. And we're also buying preferred shares of renewable companies like Brookfield as well, which are currently have a very attractive yield in the mid-5s. Next slide. So that's our performance that's your performance that we've generated for you over 13 years now, or time flies. We've generated for SMU 6.4% annualized net return after fees versus blended benchmark that generated 4.5%, the blended benchmark being 40% Canadian stocks, 60% Canadian bonds, which is pretty much what your portfolio has been comprised of for the whole time. We've had maybe extra cash on the side that we've been asked to keep from time to time, which may have acted as a bit of a drag, but as you can see, we added almost 2% per year for 13 years. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, which I can't quite see, I think you gave us $1.8 million originally. It's worth over $4 million today. I think that's a pretty good return. And you have a nice little war chest there. Next slide. There you see the annualized returns versus the benchmark. So you can see that consistently, as I mentioned previously with the rankings, whether it's a 10-year return, 5-year return, or 1-year return, we've consistently stayed above the benchmark. We're not going to beat the market every year. We're going to lag some years, but we like to, on a sort of rolling 2, 3, 4-year basis, be well ahead. Next slide. So on the equity side, we have industry exposure. Of course, it's very different from the TSX, which is very resource and bank heavy. We tend to have different weightings, more in utilities, technology, industrial, that type of thing. As you can see, your weightings in the little table below. So Boralex and Interjex are both two of the Canada's leading in renewable energy companies. You have very large weightings, 12 and 10%. They've been stellar performers this year. And then you probably recognize some of the other names like TELUS. There's some tech companies in there like Texas and MDA Commerce. There's Andrew Peller's a wine company. I hope that's okay. Altus Group's real estate services, although we just took our profits on that a few days ago. Guardian Capital is a financial services company, and Savaria makes mobility equipment for elderly people and mobility challenged people. So we're very diversified. If you want to go to the next slide as well.
Stephen, I'm just going to interrupt you.
Yep.
Can I have a motion to extend, please?
Motion to extend by 10 minutes.
Oh,
All right. Thank you very much.
I don't know how legible that is, and I really do apologize for that table. It was just.
Thank you very much,
Right
Councilor Smith. Can I have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you very much, Senator Darianani. Is there any opposition? Hearing none. Stephen, your 10-minute extension has been granted.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. So it's not very legible, but that's the equity portfolio. I think you guys have a report or a statement that you get every month and a report that you get every quarter. But as you can see, it's pretty diversified by industry and by company. As I said, you have some overweights in the renewable energy sector, which has actually been very much to your benefit there. Next slide. So on the bond side, so the portfolio, as I mentioned, has much lower duration than the index. As you can see in the upper left-hand corner, it says duration 3.57. That means 3.57 years. The index actually is more than twice that, is 8.2%. 8.2 years, is the duration of the Canadian Universe Bond Index. As I said, we like to keep it short because then we're trying to pick up yield on the corporate bonds. So the average yield of the portfolio is 2.6% versus 1.3% only for the Canadian bond universe, because there's a lot of government bonds in the index, which are not generating much these days, as you can imagine. Your portfolio has about 62% investment grade. So those are the very safe corporate bonds, and 38% high yield, which are the riskier ones. But again, we've, knock on wood, have never had a company go bankrupt in our portfolio ever. You have a sort of a breakdown of the ratings in the pie chart below that. You have the sector weightings across the board there. So as you can see, there's not a lot of resource companies in there. It's mostly telecom and financials and real estate and stuff like that, consumer. You have your top positions in the table below: Brookfield Renewable, Metro, Saputo, Cominar, Smart Center, Quebecor, TELUS, RBC, Auto Canada, Videotron. Most of those names I would think you would recognize, and with weighting sort of in the 4 to 6% range. Now, next slide, please. Those are the holdings, and again, I apologize, it's not very visible. Certainly not, doesn't look too clear on my little laptop, but again, it's pretty diversified portfolio by industry and by position size. And we also keep a fair amount of cash for you on the side, unless you otherwise ask us to invest it. Next slide. So why us? We have over 50 years experience in finance, research, and money management between myself and my two colleagues. We have, well, we should update that, leading 14-year annualized returns. We're very different from the indices, because if we were just mimicking the various indices, you could just buy an ETF and really not pay any management fees. So we're adding significant value after the deduction of our fees. And we're also adding low market correlation and low volatility as well. We don't ever make big bets on anything, and we have a diversified mix of small, mid, and large cap. It's a value-driven approach, very easy to understand approach. We don't have any fancy computer models or quant models telling us what to buy or sell. There's no artificial intelligence. It's all human intelligence here. And good cross-pollination between our fixed income strategy and our Canadian equity strategy. A lot of the companies we know are in common in both portfolios. We're fully aligned here. We eat our own cooking. I am 100% invested in all the same securities as our clients are. And of course, as portfolio managers, unlike stockbrokers or investment advisors, we have a fiduciary duty to put our clients first and serve their best interests. And we're completely transparent. You have access to your portfolio at all times. That's really the last slide in the presentation. The rest is, if you go to the next few pages, really detailed bios on Tony, myself, Martin and Olivier. So you can read all about our backgrounds. Very good experience, all three of us. As I said, I have a pretty unique background in finance in Canada. There's probably no other money manager that's done corporate lending, investment banking, was chief financial officer of a public company, started and ran a family office, and then towards the end of his career is managing money. Martin is been with us 3 years, 6 years. He was managing U.S. equities for Fleming Canada. He's not only a CFA, but also a chartered accountant. And Olivier, who's the slide before, Martin, I think, who we just hired this summer, really strengthened our fixed income team. Olivier, at the tender age of 30, has worked 7 years for the fourth largest insurance company in Canada, helping them manage $12 billion. He was on a team. He was one of 3 portfolio managers, the lead trader and lead strategist. And he lived in Quebec City and managed to get him to move here to Montreal and join us. So real solid team, good client base, really good returns, and very rigorous process. So that's it for me. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm sure you have a lot. We can be here for hours, but only have another 10 minutes, I guess.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. Are there any individuals with questions on the report from Leicester Asset Management at this time? Councillor Reid.
Hi there. Thank you for your presentation. I'm just wondering if you can give us a general overview of what the impact of the pandemic has been on our assets. I realize this is probably a question you anticipated.
Right. Well, I've been talking about that a lot this year, of course. So, when the pandemic hit, I was just stepping off of the plane and had to confine 2 weeks, and I tried to work at home for 2 days, and I said, this is not going to work. Luckily, we're an essential service, and I was never so happy to see my office. So, been putting in 10 to 12-hour days for most of that time, and what we did was a really, really, really deep dive on all the names in our portfolios. Well, obviously, including yours. They're the same names as other people own. And basically, at one point I was, having, video meetings, 5 or 6 a day, sometimes with the same management teams weekly, just to see how things were affecting our companies. In some cases, we thought things were going to, getting worse, but they actually got better in many of our companies, surprisingly. And whether by, luck or intelligence, we actually found out we had quite a resilient portfolio. Fairly COVID-proof, especially with utilities, renewable energy companies, and the likes, with some technology companies that have actually benefited from the pandemic. We've been very, very careful to avoid anything that was going to be significantly impaired. Like, we didn't own any travel, entertainment, leisure, hotels, restaurants, and retailers. Thank God. What's interesting, in a normal economic slowdown, the best performing stocks, which we owned and had back in the financial crisis, were movie theaters like Cineplex and restaurants like MTY Foods, which were stellar performers then. In a pandemic, which we've never experienced until now, those stocks, are the ones that, got decimated. Luckily, we didn't own them because they just got too expensive and we sold them over time. So we were very careful. We went through the portfolio. We hardly had to make any adjustments at all. We owned one retailer, Aritzia, where we were making good money, and it's held in really well. We have since sold it. And we own one restaurant stock, which was Restaurant Brands, which, of course, is severely impacted. And once it rebounded almost to the price we paid, we sold it as well. Because we just didn't have confidence that this pandemic was going away anytime soon, and that some of these businesses would take, a long time, years, possibly to recover. But we did make some opportunistic buys during, the lows of the market in March and April, where we added some very high quality names that had come down, like everything else, such as Brookfield Infrastructure, and some pretty safe stocks that we felt were not going to get impacted by the pandemic because, we pretty much figured, there's going to be a second wave and it's going to take a long time for a vaccine to be developed. So we just wanted to make sure that our portfolio was really secure, bulletproof. And, we rebounded much stronger than the market in April. And then we sort of leveled off and lagged the market a little bit in May and June. And then we just, our portfolio blasted off again in July and August. And then amazingly, we were up in September and October when the markets were actually down. And those are the best feelings, is when your portfolio is going up and the market's going down. So it just proved that we had, we had a good, strong COVID-proof portfolio, and that some of the new names we had added were performing, really, really well. You talked about apartments before and housing, and so one of the real estate stocks we bought, because as you can imagine, real estate's a minefield with retailers and office properties and things like that. But the apartment stocks did come down quite a bit, and there have been some rent freezes, which created some negative sentiment. So one of the stocks we did buy in the last few months was Canadian Apartment REITs, and that one's performing, really, really well as well. So just to give you some examples. So yeah, we're being very, very careful, staying away from anything that's going to continue to be affected. If the market blasts off because of a vaccine, like this month, we're going to lag, and we know that, and but we don't care as long as we perform well on the downside, and protect the risk and protect the portfolio. We're fine with that.
Great, thank you, Drew.
I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, thanks.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just had a bit of a question. You clearly value responsible and sustainable assets, and I was just wondering if you could take us a little bit deeper into how you value the sustainability of your investments.
Okay, so in terms of sustainable investing?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the first thing we do is obviously we look at all the financial characteristics. So what I'm going to talk to you about is like the non-financial characteristics, I guess. For me, it's very important that a company isn't a massive polluter, for example. So we really own very little in the manufacturing space. Like I said, we've almost avoided mining and exploration and development companies. I mean, they're also terrible businesses, but they're also, terrible for the environment. We've looked at on occasion also, where if we own a company that manufactured or was supplied abroad, we've also tried to be aware of, whether there's any kind of slave labor or child labor or that kind of stuff. I remember owning Loblaws a long time ago, and when that building collapsed, in Bangladesh, where they were making all that Joe Fresh stuff, and I was on BNN, and I was like absolutely infuriated that, Galen Weston wasn't, doing anything about it, and so we dumped our Loblaw stock on the spot. So I'm just giving you some examples. We're very, on the corporate governance. But, that's more maybe a moral thing. We try and see who's on the board, and if there's any shady characters or people with bad reputations or bad track records, we'll avoid that as well. So, those would be some of the main criteria. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, weapons, tobacco, stuff like anything that kills people, I'm just not interested. That's why we've never owned, for example, Alimentation Couche-Tard. 40% of their profits from the convenience store side of the business comes from tobacco sales. And so there's no way we're going to buy shares of a company like that. We don't touch cannabis stocks. We do own some wine companies or spirit companies. Obviously, if you drink responsibly, it's fine. We've never wanted to own SNC-Lavalin for many reasons, and mostly because of the corruption and the scandals. And even though they say those days are over, I don't believe it. It's a type of business where bribes become sort of commonplace when you're going for international contracts. We don't want to be involved with that. So those are just some examples of some of the things we look at when we consider investments. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, I guess so. I think it told me a lot about your general attitude. I was just wondering if you used any specific metrics. For example, I reckon you've probably heard about the Carbon Disclosure Project and the way you've got over 9,000 businesses that abide by these, that submit a report through them every year, for example, and get grants. So you've got big companies like L'Oreal, et cetera, that kind of go through. So I was wondering if you were using any of those specific metrics.
Not yet, but we're slowly heading in that direction. I mean, it's an evolving space for sure. And so, it's something we're going to be a lot more aware of. But at the end of the day, we also have to make our own decisions and not necessarily have accountants or auditors or whoever tell us, okay, this company ticked all the boxes. They may not tick all the boxes for us, or they might, So we do our due diligence, but we're also paid to make money for our clients, But we do have things that we look at that become sort of deal breakers.
All right, perfect. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay.
All right,
Good
thank
question.
you very much. Are there any other questions for Leicester Asset Management at this time? Seeing none, Stephen, thank you very much for taking the time out of your evening to speak to us tonight.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a great pleasure and an honor to address you.
Moving on, we'll move on to item 8, announcements. All individuals with announcements can either raise their hand via the speaking list, raise their hand through Zoom, or indicate so via the speaking list. SSMU President.
Yeah, this is just a reminder to everybody that the GA is going to be next Tuesday. So please invite your friends and show up. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, SSMU President. Are there any other individuals with announcements at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on. Moving on to item 9, question period. All individuals with questions can raise their hand at this time. Members of the gallery can also participate in question period if they so choose. Apologies if I mispronounce your name, but I will first recognize Jahangir Gasimov.
Yes, it's Jahangir. Thank you. So my question is regarding the extremely biased poll shared by SSMU about the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I'd like to bring to attention that this post made Azerbaijani and Turkish students feel unheard, unwelcome, and discriminated against. During the Legislative Council meeting 4 weeks ago, the SSMU president stated that discussing every social media post is not a productive way to solve the issue. So what is the productive way to solve the issue according to the exec team, and if ignoring concerns of Pakistani, Ukrainian, and Turkish student associations, and a letter co-joined by 97 students is a valid way to solve the issue? And moreover, is the exec team willing to meet with our representatives to resolve the issue? Thank you.
I'm just going to note that going forward, leading questions as indicated are not going to be permitted. SSMU executives, you can reply to the general sentiment of meeting and just in regards to the general sentiment, but you don't have to reply to any leading parts of the question. VP University Affairs.
Sure, thank you. First of all, thank you for attending and for voicing your concerns. Always appreciate members' input and participation, especially in SSMU governance. Personally speaking, yes, of course, I'm willing to meet with any member that brings concerns to me, to SSMU more generally. I realize that this is not just any concern, but of course, I'm more than happy to meet with you, to meet with any of our affiliated associations to discuss the issue. Yeah, and I think I will leave it at that.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other individuals with questions at this time? Member of the gallery, Tan Akpek.
So, excuse me, I gave it up a meeting name. So here's the thing. In my question, I don't wish to address the executives, but rather someone from the judicial board. Is such a person present right now?
No, members of the judicial board don't attend legislative council meetings.
Okay, so I might just then generally voice my own concerns.
They have to be raised in the point of a question.
Yeah, in the form of a question formally. If you would recall, in 2016, a similar event occurred regarding the BDS movements between Palestinian and Israeli students. And according to the conclusions that the judicial board came, if you'd allow me to just read out right now. In conclusion, all motions which compel the SSMU to actively campaign against specific countries are unconstitutional. Doing so would place one group at a structural disadvantage vis-a-vis the majority and is thus discriminatory. Now, people such as myself facing this open discrimination are obviously in grievance with regard to this. And that's actually the reason why I'm not addressing these executives, because they seem incapable of recognizing their errors. But my question is more to the general house of this convention. What do you guys aim to do to rectify this open violation of your own constitution and the violation of unity of our student body as a whole?
We will first go to VP University Affairs. You have your hand up. Am I correct in assuming that this is in regards to reference?
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will first acknowledge that I recognize that your question was not directed at SSMU executives, and so after this, I'm just going to make a quick point, but I would say in reference to the 2016 ruling of the Judicial Board, it was also explicitly stated that their ruling did not preclude the SSMU from taking positions or making statements on, in this case, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, simply that it could not adopt a position against a given nation itself. I believe that keeping in mind that our statement was not first of all a formal position nor a statement, but I acknowledge was definitely partisan, did definitely announce some kind of political belief. I would still say that it is well within the confines of the 2016 reference, in the sense that we're not adopting a position against any given nation nor its people, simply a statement of belief and solidarity around a given event or the actions of a given nation, which I believe it's important to recognize are distinct. That being said, acknowledging...
The VP University Affairs can continue.
Apologies.
Thank you. Acknowledging that question was not directed at me or the executives, I would like to yield my time to any other member of the Legislative Council that would like to answer.
All right, thank you very much, VP University Affairs. If there's any other individual wishing to participate in response?
Point of personal privilege.
Senator Darianani.
Could the question be rephrased and or repeated with just the question?
Yep. Tan, you can repeat.
My question is how the SSMU as a whole, with its respective bodies, aim to rectify the open violation of its constitution.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other members of the Legislative Council wishing to participate? Senator Darianani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I echo the sentiments and the words of the Vice President, University Affairs, and I do not think that there is any violation of the Constitution, as justified with a very eloquent explanation. So I do not think that the question deserves more than an answer that was already given.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Daryanani. Tan for one follow-up.
Hi, so I'm
sorry, Tan for a follow-up. No.
Yes, I do see your point in arguing that this wasn't confirming a position. However, I've quotes from the original post right now, and some quotes were especially hurtful. The one such quote was, "Armenians are currently facing severe threats of ethnic cleansing once again in the 21st century. We cannot let this happen again. We demand that the international community respect the Republic of Artsak's right to self-determination, and Turkey and Azerbaijan held accountable for their international law and human rights violations." So I think that my and my fellow friends' countries being called genocidal is quite hurtful to some extent. Like, if you guys fail to recognize this, that's on your part. But I think the issue goes beyond that. And I think we could draw many more parallels between what happened in 2016 and the current situation right now. And it still disturbs me that instead of trying to see the issue from our perspective, which is more than 300 people, you'd still stick to three people's opinion. There are 3 Armenian students in this school. So as I don't feel like I'm being represented and my thoughts being shut off, I'm baffled by this stance that you guys still don't think that this is partisan or putting my people, well, not my people of any minority in a structural disadvantage. Don't you think, okay, my question is that, don't you think that you are underplaying the partisan component of your of this content, essentially?
I'm going to, unless you can rephrase it for that question not to be leading, I'm going to strike it out of order.
Okay, so would any of the executives not believe that accusing a certain person's country,
that's still leading?
Okay, here's a simple question. Do you believe unbased accusations of genocide are hurtful and discriminatory or not?
Point of order, this is also a leading question.
It's also a leading question.
Okay, I'm not a part of your forum, so I'm not up to date with the procedural requirements, but...
Madam Speaker, if you want to explain what a leading question is, I think that'd be beneficial.
Okay, so the question just can't lean a certain way, and so generally appeals to emotion or any sort of logical appeal isn't to be, so like there are no questions, so don't you believe, or like no questions indicating a side, just they have to be an objective, straightforward question.
Okay. Are accusations of genocide towards a certain person's country a display of partisan behavior on the side of SMU?
Okay, we'll accept that. VP University Affairs.
Thank you. And I do want to apologize for the difficulty that you've been presented with. I realize that this is not always the most accessible forum, but I do thank you for your patience. I don't think anyone here is denying that that post was partisan, that it did display a political opinion. I would just restate that SMU is a political organization as much as it is a representative body. We have established positions on like numerous subjects, all of which are partisan. We do pick sides. We're a political organization. That being said, the fact that we can share opinions, and I would note that in this specific instance, it was not a statement written by the SMU. It was a statement shared by the SMU in solidarity, but that's beside the point. I agree that it was still a show of agreement and solidarity by the society. We were still aligning ourselves with a given position. That being said, I don't think there's more than I could say that then SMU is a political organization. We have mandates to speak out on matters of human rights and social justice, and that was exactly what this was in line with. I don't think the fact that there are fewer Armenian members of SMU than there are Azerbaijani members of SMU should dictate which position we take, because ultimately the political opinions that are expressed by the SMU are determined by our internal policies, by our stated opinions, by our constitutional mandate to speak out on matters of human rights, no matter where in the world. So while I do respect that not all SMU members are going to agree with this political opinion, the intention was never to speak out against Azerbaijani members of the society. It was to speak out against the actions of a given government. And it's regrettable that that was alienating to some members, that some members felt alienated by that. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to speak out against injustices that we perceive in the world and to stand in solidarity with our members when they ask us to do so. It's not that we're taking a position against Azerbaijani students. It's that we're sharing a message in solidarity with Armenian students and calling out social injustice when we see it in the world.
You guys should read more about before.
And we're going to strike that out of order. You're allowed to do. We're going to strike this comment out of order.
This is capped. This is exactly capped.
We're going to strike this out of order. Moving on, can we have a motion to extend? Moving on, can I have a motion to extend question period? Given that we have a lot reached our 5 minutes, but there is still a member of the gallery wishing to pose a question. Can we have a motion to extend?
Motion to extend.
Thank you very much, Senator Parsons. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Is there any opposition? Actually, Senator Parsons, can I just have an indication for how long you'd like to extend by?
My apologies. 10 minutes, please.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Parsons. 10 minutes. We'll also note that that was continued. That was continually second. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, we'll next recognize Rachel Tang. If you can just, for the purpose of the minutes, just spell your name when you speak, just spell your name for the purpose of the minutes and then your personal pronouns if you choose to do so.
Hi, my name is Rachel Tang. I'd like to add on to Tan's previous comments on SMU releasing biased statement about political stance. So a few weeks ago, SMU also released a statement taking a stance on the issue between Hong Kong SAR and China mainland. So as many Chinese mainland students feel the same way as I do, I would like to express my dissatisfaction toward a misleading effect of this statement that causes many hatred and division among social media that targets toward the Chinese community. So some comments on the social media include the Chinese are basically fascist, these people are savage and ignorant. The Chinese students who stand against this statement, they likely have ties to the Chinese Communist Party. So I feel like the purpose of this statement hasn't been used toward the right purpose. In our scenario, we've been a target of racism, and we suffer from tremendous psychological distress. So here I would like to direct a question to members of the Legislative Council. So do you think that the SMU executives should consult the Legislative Council prior to issuing a statement that takes a stance on international affairs?
All individual, yeah, that's a leading question. Can you rephrase it so it's not leading?
Does the SMU executive have the obligation to consult the Legislative Council prior to issuing a statement on international affairs?
So if I can intervene, any question that starts with "do" basically counts as a leading question. Questions that, maybe a question that starts with what, who, where, why, how would be more appropriate.
Okay, so what should the SMU executive do prior to issuing a statement on international affairs?
Yeah, that's perfect. I know some individuals have, like Councillor Cross, like I know you've already raised your hand. But if there's any member of the council, legislative council, like an actual counselor that would like to speak, if your hand isn't already raised, just let me know in like the chat. Actually, raise your hand, or Councillor Krosick, is your hand in regard to something else or in response?
Yeah, it was actually, well, it's kind of point of personal privilege, but if the answer is yes, then it was going to be something else. It was going to basically ask, am I allowed to ask a clarifying question of a question previously posed by a member of the gallery?
From the Rachel Tang just now?
No, from the prior member.
I think. From Tan?
Yes.
Yeah, Tan left the meeting.
Okay, then
Yep.
never mind.
Thank you very much. Are there any individual from the Legislative Council or a member of the executive that that is willing to reply to Rachel Tang's question? VP University Affairs.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to keep this fairly broad because I think simply put, we release a lot of statements on a lot of different things. Some of them end up being controversial. Most of them don't. And genuinely, sometimes it is hard to know the difference beforehand, but that's entirely on a personal note. In terms of procedure, like what should be done prior to releasing statements, particularly on international concerns, I can speak. I can speak from a governance perspective. In terms of governance, the release of statements is fairly ambiguous in terms of our governing documents. We have a mandate to speak out, but there really isn't a procedural framework around who has the authority to approve or authorize statements, who should be drafting statements, who needs to be consulted. There really aren't many guidelines, unfortunately, within SMU's governing documents. I am a firm believer in consultation, generally speaking, especially in terms of like projects and policies and long-term positions of the society. I think with statements, especially statements in response to pressing concerns, recent events, there is always a bit of a time crunch. It does make it logistically difficult for us to actively respond to developing events in the world when, of course, we want to consult as many people as possible. So I think generative discussions at Legislative Council are always ideal. When that can't happen, our next step is to look at our governing documents, our policies, our positions, to try and establish what the opinion of the society should be or what it is. And then sometimes even that is ambiguous. I think over the past couple months, especially, what it has really come down to the interpretation of the executive committee of our governing documents, of our mandate to speak out on matters of social justice and human rights and environmentalism, of course, in consulting as many student groups as possible, especially if we can't always consult Legislative Council. And I think that all of the statements that we have released in the past, particularly political statements, have all been in consultation with student groups, if not with council itself. So unfortunately, I don't have much in the way of a formal procedure for what we need to do before releasing statements. I think what we should do is consult as many people as possible when that is possible. And when it's not possible, of course, we always try our best to base our decisions not only based off of our own platforms, what we were elected on, the beliefs that we were elected to represent, but the governing documents and express positions of the society. I would also note that I think, especially recently, members of myself and other members of the executive committee have been working on some kind of established framework to govern how statements are released. I was hoping to bring that to council today, but just came a little bit too late, and hopefully we'll be able to discuss it in 2 weeks' time at the last council of the year. But we are working to establish a framework because we do realize that this ambiguity can be confusing, it can be inaccessible, it does create a lot of, it can create a lot of chaos, a lot of uncertainty, and that is something that we want to resolve. And that is something that we are working to resolve, to like try to establish some kind of framework of who should be releasing what statements, like who needs to be consulted, who has the power to do what. And while unfortunately, like I don't have anything big to unveil today, it is coming.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Reid has also indicated that they'd like to speak in response. So Councillor Reid.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I recognize it, and this is sort of in reference to the last member of Gallery as well, to raise a question on a statement made by SSMU. Although this is, and notwithstanding to my personal views on either the CCP or the situation in Azerbaijan, I think it is important that we take a serious look on the really macrospective view of the impacts that these statements are having, whether or not they actually agree with our political mandates. I think we need to care more about whether they agree with our mandate of actually ensuring that SSMU members have a more safe, sustainable, and functional academic experience. And regardless of whether or not it's aligning with the political mandate, I think it really does count for something, regardless of whether or not they do or don't support the CCP. If because of statements made by SSMU and the debate surrounding them, students might experience feelings of marginalization, experience challenges to their mental health, and not be able to do schoolwork in the way that they otherwise would. I mean, that is in direct conflict with the overall ultimate mandate of SSMU, which is to support students. And I think it's although there's certainly a delineation between attacking a regime and attacking an entire country, I don't think that we can invalidate students' feelings of marginalization based on that. And so when we have this sort of system for statements where it all essentially comes from the executives, I realize that in general governance proceedings, that's how it's done. But I don't think that with such, below 50% voter turnout in SSMU elections, we can really consider, although I, appreciate and like all the executives, I think it would be misguided of us to, put the entire external politics side of things with, on the executive side of it without any legislative input. And so I look forward to seeing the VP University Affairs' motion to revise this and attempt to make it more sustainable. But I really do think that regardless of our political leanings, we need to come up with a system that actually prevents these really, really ugly and generally, frankly, unproductive and consistent, pervasive controversies in the McGill political sphere. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm just going to remind everyone for when asking questions, again, no leading questions. I will announce it when I believe your question is leading, and you can correct it as such. Furthermore, if I strike something out of order, or if I say it's not to be entertained, continuing to speak or continuing to attempt to speak over me can and will result in your removal from the meeting. So exercise your behavior accordingly. With that, we're going to move on, and we're going to move on to Councillor Collins. Again, there's all individuals who are wishing to speak, assuming that we have an extension to this time, will receive rights for asking a question, but bear with me, we have quite a few to go through. But Councillor Collins.
Yeah, so apologies if this has been clarified. I don't think it hasn't. If it has, I'm still confused. But what I essentially want to know is just what the actual process is of executives when they're deciding to share a statement on behalf of an association or not, just because it seems as though both my constituents and myself are kind of looking for a very clear, simple explanation of that process. For example, if another group that was impacted by the conflict in the Caucasus chose to make a statement about their stance, and that stance conflicted with that of Massa, would you share both statements even though they contradict each other? How would you choose which statement to share over the other one? Like, what is that process? And are all groups that are affected or might have a stake or a stance in that conflict consulted? Does that make sense?
Yeah. VP in response?
Yep.
Okay, VP University.
Right. Okay. So I can first talk a little bit about the procedure. Because as I've said, there isn't a whole lot of, there isn't really a very clear procedural framework. So I guess I'll just talk about like the status quo and how statements have been released in the past. So generally like what happens, especially if we're approached by a club, and relative association, essentially a group of people that want to make a joint statement or want us to share their statement. So if it was, for example, a joint statement, someone asked us to make a statement on something, or for example, of our own accord, we chose to write a statement on a given matter. It's usually written in at least either like by members of the executive committee or by members of that given group with members of the executive committee jointly. And then, or if they're asking us to share one of those statements, it's just provided to us directly. At that point, it goes through our communications department, who like thoroughly vets everything alongside like regular like copy editing, proofreading, stuff like that. Then once the communications department is happy with it, that it's all like grammatically correct, that that there aren't any like red flags, then it is presented to executive committee for approval. If it is approved, it is sent for translation and for distribution. That is the framework. I will say, for example, if the executive committee decided to make a statement on a given matter, like of its own accord, if we just saw something in the news and thought like this is important, we should say something about this. The process there, I think the best way to do this is probably through an example. One example would be over the summer, our statement on Black Lives Matter and anti-Black racism, police violence. In that case, it was, I guess I would say, executive motivated. It came from kind of our own accord in response to, I guess, like pressing global events. So from there, like I believe the process we went through, we consulted with BSN. In fact, the majority of the statement was actually just directly from BSN, which was then, so written in collaboration with BSN, and then it went through that standard protocol. So yeah, it's essentially either written by executives in consultation with like a relevant student group, or it's written by a student group and then vetted by executives and the communications department before release. Like I said, I don't think that's maybe an ideal procedural framework. I would just say that's the status quo, because there isn't really any firm guidelines in terms of governance. It's not in any of our policies. It's not in the Constitution. In terms of how we decide which statements to release or share, this might seem like a generic answer, but it is really the truth. When we're handed, for example, a statement, a group wants us to share their statement or promote their statement, we read it, we deliberate on it. We usually will bring it to an executive committee meeting and discuss it. We basically decide amongst ourselves, do we think this aligns with SSMU's policies? Do we think this aligns with previous positions that we've taken? Is it something that we all personally believe in as executives? Is it something that we're comfortable sharing on behalf of the SSMU? I think like yeah, I don't know like if this has always been the case, but at least this year, every statement that's released is always a unanimous decision of executives. I don't think we've ever shared a statement this year as the executive committee that wasn't a unanimous decision. So it's in deciding what to share, it really is, I guess it does kind of come down to the judgment of like the elected executives, both in reference to the society's stated opinions, political opinions, past political activity, and like our, I guess our own best judgment and the platforms that we were elected on.
All right, thank you very much. We'll next go towards VP External. Is this a question, VP External?
No, this is a comment.
In regards to which question?
Oh, well, I mean, my hand was raised in response to the comment of Councillor Reid.
Okay, we'll entertain it.
Okay, thank you. So in response to the comment from Councillor Reid, I just wanted to emphasize, well, I suppose two things. One being sort of similarly to, as you say, like the intention of any statement released by whether it's solely by the decision of the executive committee or by a decision of or with the involvement of the legislative council or even with the board of directors, is never to marginalize our students, and of course, like we recognize what everybody here is capable of recognizing, kind of the variety of opinions within the student body, and furthermore, like more importantly or more notably, the feelings of marginalization that some students have may have felt with in response to the published communications of the SSMU. So it's certainly well taken and understood or recognized that there are unintentional effects of certain political there are like unintentional, or you could just simply say like adverse effects of some political communications from the SSMU on its student body, and that's not something that can be ignored. And so the other point is that SSMU doesn't, kind of in speaking about like the purpose or the goal of SSMU being to support students. Yeah, like SSMU has the stated purposes of the SSMU as an organization are to provide service, representation, and leadership to the student body, McGill, and so there can be, and so it's like we need to be able to fulfill to the best of our abilities the service, the representation, and also the leadership. And so what that looks like is going to be like you could say is going to be what that looks like is going to develop as kind of the SSMU exists and evolves, and just kind of and as executives and councillors sort of use their best judgment to make decisions on how to serve, represent, and also lead the student body. And so it's a matter of understanding how to Yeah, well, yeah, like it's a matter of understanding. It will be like the I think what's at stake here in this kind of in that. So with respect to this question of the marginalization of students, which of course is real and legitimate and can't be ignored, is how does the SMU maintain its commitment to human rights, social justice, environmental protection, and in particular to showing leadership on these matters, while acknowledging that that doing that can often have like a variety. It is of like harmful effects on its student body, which is can't be ignored. So yeah, that's my comment.
All right, thank you very much, VP External. We'll next go to Kai. So if you can just introduce yourself